What's the biggest element in a disaster?
People. This is one of the reasons, one, for the disasters, but another one, it's a reason for them, we'll call it getting more severe and more frequent. The first ingredient comes from a very dear friend I developed during an investigation I and colleagues and students performed on the Exxon Valdez. So we were involved in that investigation. His name is Dr. Ed Wink Jr. Ed looks at me and says, Bob, it's easy. Engineers want to believe the planet is not inhabited. Well, of course, that turns out to be closer to the truth than a joke, because we tend to be, particularly in my generation, not very sociable. You can tell it at parties. We're usually off in a corner talking business or something boring going on about our work.
You're not the life and soul of the party.
Right. We're usually boring as hell. So you then start to say, well, okay, Bob, how much work did you do in your schooling education regarding history? Are you kidding? I'm not interested in history. I'm a scientist. I'm an engineer. Well, what about psychology? Are you kidding?
Yeah.
People, that's just for people.
Well, we're not interested in that.
Okay, well, there's the ingredient, isn't it? Because the engineering psyche says, well, we'll engineer the stuff, and the rest will be taken care of by someone else. Good management. Guess what? There's the ingredient. The first one is people.
Okay, so if you had to express it in a percentage terms, would you? Because I think I read you said it was like 80% people and 20% sort of outside factors.
Actually, that's what I've written.
Yeah.
If you look at it very closely, you can convince yourself it's 100% people.
Yeah.
I was coming back from a early trip to New Orleans to Berkeley. I had to give a lecture that morning. I got off the airplane here that morning and thought, I don't have anything to tell this graduate class. So as I'm coming in a taxi to the university, I came up with an answer. And the answer was a disaster causation equation. So I come to class, I get up in front of the blackboard, and I wrote the equation A plus B equals C. Okay? And I looked at the class and I said, C is a disaster sooner or later. A, natural hazards. It could be intense storms, big waves, high winds, volcanic action, earthquakes. B, well, it's kind of natural too, but it's called human hubris, arrogance, greed, ignorance, and indolence. A plus B equals C. So the B part of the equation is a crucial part because that's the part we can control.
But, I remember when the bridge collapsed over, it was in Minneapolis, wasn't it?
Yes,
now,
I-35.
Yeah, and that was just down to, they just were like praying it. They just didn't care, did they? It just didn't seem anyone was bothered. You see what I mean? There was no, they just hoped it wouldn't fail. It was almost like fate that it wouldn't fail. They didn't try and make it not fail. So what did you think when you saw that bridge collapse? Did you think that's because one of the things I'd like to cover is about the infrastructure in the United States, and it looks a bit
Tattered.
Yeah, could do with a bit of a spruce up.
Oh, yes.
So could you talk about the infrastructure and what possible problems you could see in the future with it?
Well, back to the I-35 bridge, disasters have histories. They have a conception phase, a birth phase, and it plays all the way out till the time the disaster happens. I-35, that bridge, started to collapse when it was designed. It had design flaws. It then led to construction flaws, then to operation and maintenance flaws. Finally, bridge overloaded, collapse, big disaster. Not a surprise. It was, as has been termed, a predictable surprise. But you struck on it. Nobody cared, it appeared. Here's back to hubris. Can't happen here. Arrogance, already know the answer. Then you go to greed. Well, I've got more bridges to worry about. Then you go to ignorance. Who cares about bird poop and corrosion?
Yeah.
And then you finally get to indolence, not doing anything. Deadly disaster.
So it's almost a case of, there's bridges out there now that similar things could happen to.
And will. And in fact, they have been. We've had a rash of infrastructure. It's a boring word. But
No, I think I actually think it's a fascinating word. I think it's one of the most important things. Yeah. Anyway, sorry to interrupt.
We've had a rash of these failures. Bridges. I worked on a big one we had here locally called the San Bruno gas pipeline explosion. Blew up a neighborhood, killed a number of people. You look back at it, and it was also designed, engineered to fail. Put in the ground, and I'd call it a tragedy of neglect. People hoping, people saying, well, we're doing this according to, quote, code. And at that point, the clock's ticking. It's just a matter of time. Boom.
Yeah, because it's incredible, wasn't it, really? Just like the whole neighborhood just blew up. Like,
right.
Yeah.
And in the fire, people didn't even know there was a gas pipeline there.
Oh, that was a surprising afternoon, I bet. Well, what's that? That big...
And you'd say, well, who's actually in charge?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Because how do you think you're going to stop this? Is it a case of legislation or training, or punitive fines? What happened to the San Bruno people? Someone, I know it's a bit human nature to want someone to hang for something, but yeah, but how can that be prevented again?
We're working on it.
Yeah.
I just saw, we have a California Public Utilities Commission, PUC. They're the state regulatory agency. Now, we also have a Department of Transportation federal agency who has responsibility. But here in California, it's primarily the state that has a responsibility. Recently saw a newspaper article, and this is getting to answer the question you asked, said, we are going to spend $7 million to change our culture so that we now will have a culture of safety.
Yeah.
And that will be a preventative measure. And when I saw that, I thought, that won't work. You can't pay somebody to, quote, come in and change your culture.
No.
It's something that happens over time, and you've got to be fighting those B things in the equation. You've got to be fighting that hubris and that arrogance and ignorance. $7 million in a culture change isn't going to do it.
Because one thing I was interested in, because what industry has made the most improvements in aviation, because I once interviewed an airline pilot, and he said, and he'd been in a plane crash and he'd survived, and he said it was all about CRM, like crew resource management, and he said before that there was a blame culture and no one would speak up, because if you spoke up, you were, yeah, exactly, and you would never challenge a senior member of the flight crew or anything like that, and then next thing you know, you're crashing into a field somewhere. Right. So do you think there can be lessons learned from that for other industries, say for construction? Do you think there is too much of a, I'm not going to say anything, I hope it doesn't happen, and we'll all hope no one dies?
That's part of it.
Yeah.
I'll link to another story. In 2000, a colleague of mine here, Professor Carlene Roberts, and I had a very remarkable experience. We were invited to come to London, England. Mm-hmm. And we were invited to come there by British Petroleum.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, BP and Lord Brown was not yet Lord. He was still John Brown. Yeah. Was behind that invitation because of the Grangemouth refinery failures. Mm. Big failure, big impacts on the United Kingdom. Mm. Here at Berkeley, Professor Roberts and I had been studying a variety of high hazard industries, commercial aviation, nuclear power. Mm-hmm. Carlene is a social scientist, special expertise in organizational behavior. Mm. So she's a people person. And here's Bob, an engineer who doesn't like people. So he decides to join and collaborate with Carlene. Now, I made that decision because I found out she was working for the United States Navy nuclear aircraft carriers. Okay. She got to know the equivalent of fast gun early in her career. Mm-hmm. How do they keep from blowing up these aircraft carriers with these young kids flying F-14 Tomcats and they're nuclear powered and so forth? And she had started to publish her work. Mm-hmm. So I'd been through, by this time, Piper Alpha, Exxon Valdez. I joined with Carlene, and we start to see, well, the answer to this is a combination that takes engineering insight, but very, very strong insight into people. Well, BP had heard about it. And you can say, well, how did BP hear about it? And I'd say, stranger story. Because now we'll have to go from 2000, we're going to back to 1980. Okay, Bob's left Shell. Yeah. He's moved to California without a job, helped start a new company, and we're out looking for clients. Mm-hmm. And we see a new client has moved to San Francisco called Sohio BP. Okay. They're working on the North Slope. We say, well, we've worked in the Arctic, understand ice, so up there we become extremely good colleagues with Sohio BP, helping them develop the North Slope. Mm-hmm. Well, they learn. I've developed, and some of my colleagues, the special expertise in risk assessment and management. Mm-hmm. So they bring us to London. Mm-hmm. This is in 1982. Okay. And we're giving courses to the board of directors for British Petroleum on assessing and managing risk. Yeah. Okay. Well, Grangemouth happens, 2000. Yeah. They see I've now kind of brought the human factor in. Off to London we go. And we collaborate with BP for the next 7 years, dealing with these human factors, complex technology, engineering things, objective, stop big disasters. Yeah. not slip, trips, and falls,
Yeah,
but
the
these
big-
showstoppers.
Yeah. So how would you know? Like, obviously not to give away any trade secrets, but how do you do it? How does the process work? Do you go in and just give lectures, or do you?
It'll kill it.
Yeah. I was going to say, everybody would be like, there'll probably be
goes to
more
sleep.
disasters.
Excellent question.
Yeah.
The first thing is it's not quick, easy, or free. Next thing is you can't lecture. One of the most successful ways we found to do it is you become part of what's happening, which means you've got to be able to put on overalls. You appear as part of the working team, and at that point, you start to then see deeply into why things are happening like they are. How are these people thinking? What's incentivizing them? When you start to get there, then you say, well, maybe there's a way we could start to get them thinking about what could happen. So you work it from the inside out. If you try and come from the outside in, good luck.
Yeah, you're just going to be seen as a threat almost, aren't you?
A meddler.
Yeah.
And frequently, and I don't want to be disrespectful to academics, we tend to be meddlers.
Yeah.
We tend to be afraid of the deck plate, quite frankly.
Really?
The steel and the concrete and the explosive stuff.
Yeah.
I smell something I could burn up
Gasoline,
here. I want to go back to the classroom where it's safe.
Yeah. But didn't you used to work in the oil industry very, 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 very when you were very young?
Yes.
Yeah.
And see, that's what gave me, again, this incredible series of combinations.
Yeah.
I went to work as a roughneck in 1960. July, offshore Louisiana, working on a drill rig.
How was that?
Scary, but I loved it.
Yeah.
I got my first degree, bachelor's degree, and had gone on and got the master's degree, had part of this Texas Tower experience, and so I said, well, I want to work for the oil and gas industry. It's the kind of stuff I like to do.
But why? What attracted you?
Exciting.
To it? Yeah.
Ocean. I love the ocean.
Yeah.
Love water.
Yeah.
It's new.
Yeah.
There's nobody out there.
Yeah.
Look out across the ocean. There is nobody.
No cities are there.
So I thought, well, this is good country for me to learn and grow. But I'm going to grow from the inside.
Yeah.
So I went to work as a roughneck, even became a derrick man. After the derrick man lost 4 fingers. So
you saw someone, or you knew someone lost 4 fingers?
Oh yeah, the blood was raining down on us on the deck.
And then you still went up there?
Yeah. They tied a rope around my waist and said, reach out and grab the pipe.
So is that what you do? Like you climb up and then you've got to pull the pipe?
100 feet, 30 meters in the air.
Wow.
We were pulling triple pipe.
Yeah.
And the derrick man had cut all 4 fingers, and we'd had a tourniquet and get him to a boat because we were in a swamp rig. So no helicopters
And you're not near a hospital.
And so the tool pusher comes on the deck again, looks at the deck, and he says, B, get your ass up there. Just pick me out of the crew.
Yeah.
So I go up there, and they give me instructions, and I say, well, I could fall. And they tie a rope around my waist and said, reach out and grab pipe. Well, that's the introduction for me to how the industry was managing risk.
Yeah, not very well.
Well, in a different way. How to put it? The early pioneers frequently, particularly the pioneers in this country, didn't handle risk very well. We see the Indians, the Native Americans, and say, well, they're no problem. Well, of course, guess what? They are a problem. And so there came the problem. So pioneers frequently don't handle risk well because they handle it by experience. It's try and fail. Try and fail, maybe succeed, go the succeed route. So it's a painful, long process. The industry at that stage was in the experience stage.
Do you think there has to be that? You can't jump past that process you've just outlined. You know, there always has to be a disaster almost to make people think, oh, we shouldn't do that. There's no way of not doing it.
No, there is a way.
Okay.
And the only way I can say that so confidently is nuclear power.
Well, go ahead.
Okay.
There's been, go on.
Commercial nuclear power, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
but there has been a few disasters.
Of course there has. Anything we do, people, organizations, can and should expect disasters. There's no risk-free game in town.
No, you can walk out your front door and get hit by a bus.
Bingo.
Yeah.
Now, it pays to look both ways.
Yes, exactly.
It pays to cross at the corner with a light.
And not wear sunglasses at night.
Exactly. But, of course, sometimes we do stupid stuff and we get,
Because I was going to ask about Fukushima, and it just seemed like every worst circumstance just conspired to...
We'll get there.
Yeah, okay.
We'll get there.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the 1950s.
Okay.
Which is where nuclear power is really getting its start. And as we come into commercial nuclear power from the military nuclear power, the atom bomb and nuclear-powered submarines and so forth, at this point, the industry says, well, if we blow up a commercial nuclear power plant close to a populated center, it's going to be a showstopper. So we have to make sure this does not happen. And they put into place some strong technology that early influenced that industry and continues to influence the industry today.
Yeah, because, if one of them goes up, that's it.
We shut it down.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've reinforced it.
Yeah.
Nuclear power knew at the start to be afraid. He also had some smart people at the start.
Yeah.
In this country, Admiral Hyman Rickover.
Yeah.
The Rickover Navy. He was a very challenging person.
Oh.
a kind of, he was mean, ornery. And he would not let anybody come into his Navy that he had not personally approved. Earlier I mentioned Ed Wink Jr.
Yeah.
Ed Wink worked for Hyman Rickover.
Oh, so he's got that.
So here's the connections now again showing up. Well, they understood the importance of the human factors. They understood the hazards of the nuclear factors, and then they brought in some very advanced technology from Europe that allowed us to quantify what the word safe means. Another big deal. Yeah. Another big deal showing up here. Because nuclear power said, well, we want it to be safe. But they knew if they blew up a plant, it would have extremely high consequences. So they were going to have to be safer than other systems. Yeah. And the question was, how much safer? Well, they went to work on it, answered the question to their satisfaction, and then formed the foundation base for modern commercial nuclear power.
So it's been built on safe foundations, and they continue to build on them, I guess.
With some exceptions. Fukushima Daiichi.
Yeah.
Perfect example. Here's TEPCO. TEPCO says, well, could we have tsunamis? Sure. Japan has them all the time. We're going to put in seawalls for the tsunamis, and we're going to design a conventional nuclear power plant. Oh, okay. And we've got defense for tsunami. Yeah. And then you're saying, okay, well, then what happened? Well, in a conventional nuclear power plant, where are the reserve generators for emergency power? They're in the basement. Where were the emergency generators for Fukushima Daiichi? In the basement.
You're joking.
So that when the water comes over the top, goes to the basement, there goes the power, there goes your nuclear power plant.
I didn't. I knew that. I knew it was a backup generator there, but I didn't realise they put them in the basement.
Okay, now there's more to this story. As a result of this unusual, I'll call it life, I've been blessed with. I've got friends all over the world who are very experienced warriors like me.
Yeah.
One of them went to Fukushima Daiichi shortly after it happened. And he's over there, Dr. Charlie Hawthorne, communicating back to me. And he said, Bob, you'll never believe what happened today. He said, we were taking a break from the investigation at Fukushima Daiichi and walked to a nearby village. They're just up the slope from Fukushima Daiichi. And he said there was a granite obelisk at the side of the road. He said, here's a picture on this email. Sends me the picture. And it's got Japanese inscriptions on it. And I said, Charlie, what did the inscription say? He said, don't build below this elevation. That granite obelisk went back to the 1300s.
Oh, let's just put a nuclear power station here. You know, that's criminal, basically.
Nothing. It's human.
Yeah, but
we sort of think we can knock it. We can do it. We'll put in a seawall. Here's hubris and arrogance going at work.
I was going to say, do you think people think they can just combat the elements, but like you said, sticking up a seawall, build on a floodplain, it doesn't matter, it's a 100-year flood. What does that even mean, that phrase, 100 years? It's like
when I hear it, I
get
jittery.
So how does the process work? Like after an incident, so if you could talk about one you're quite familiar with, like does the phone ring at 3 a.m. in the morning and then you have to go down, or how does it work?
Different ways.
Yeah.
As you were asking the question, the first one, of course, that kicked into my brain was BP Macondo disaster, Gulf of Mexico, April 20th, 2010. I'm working at my home office, Raga, California. It's 9 p.m. our time, or pardon me, it's 7 p.m. our time, and I get a call. I pick up the phone, and it's a friend who lives in Houma, Louisiana. She says, Bob, I've been listening to the radio. Okay, so what, Lillian? She said, well, the guys on the Deepwater horizon are screaming for drill mud. And I said, well, what's happening? She said, I can't tell, but apparently they're in deep and bleep, bleep, bleep.
Yeah.
And she hangs up the phone. Well, I pick up the newspaper the next morning and see the pictures of the Deepwater Horizon drill rig, and it's in flames. She called me before the blowout.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. Well, then the next morning I see it and say, holy hell. Here's one of the reasons BP called Carlene Roberts and I to London in January 2000 to help them prevent exactly what happened. Piper Alpha. It was into Piper Alpha very early. Two of my friends from the Shell days working in Alaska in the 1960s, one was the production superintendent for Piper Alpha. The other was a production engineer, both in Aberdeen, Scotland.
Okay.
Both had brought me to Aberdeen 2 years before Piper Alpha to help them assess the emerging risks associated with this platform and the gas processing facilities at the Shetland Islands. Well, here we go, July 5th, 1988, blow it up. I get a phone call at home, says, Bob, we got a big problem. You need to get to Aberdeen quick.
So this is in California. Were you in California? Yeah.
I was in California. Ted Hall's in Aberdeen, Scotland, calling me and says, come, we need you quick.
Yeah.
I was there 5 days later. Followed it all the way through the Cullen Commission hearings and so forth.
Because you did mention that you think that the UK oil industry in UK is very good for safety now.
Yes.
Yes. And why do you think that is? Because of basically Piper Alpha made everyone think.
Yes, but it made more than everyone think. Was what it was reaching for. The UK had established a very strong ethic for industrial safety. You had the Health and Safety Executive, HSE. But Piper Alpha happened under a different group. Well, when Piper Alpha happened, the UK had enough insight to see that the regulatory agency had become captured by the industry. It's called regulatory capture.
Does that happen quite a lot?
Yeah.
Yeah, I bet it does.
It's very popular here in the United States. Well, the UK, because of your nuclear power heritage and your Comet aircraft heritage.
Oh, wow.
Commercial aircraft.
Let's have some square windows.
Oh, yeah. Dr. Freudenthal, we brought him to New Orleans to advise us on how not to have Comet aircraft equivalents offshore. Here's this cross-industry transfer. So the Health and Safety Executive comes in. The Cullen Commission comes in with very strong recommendations. It's implemented, and today you have, I'd call it a world-class regulatory industrial regime to manage a very hazardous offshore oil and gas operation.
Because people still do die, though, because it's in the helicopters now. It seems to be the thing. The helicopters seem to crash a lot. So.
Right. Here again are these layers of complexity. The safety challenge has got two big sectors, as we've come to understand them. One is what we call personal safety. Slip, trips, and falls, helicopter accidents, boat accidents, lots of boat accidents, diving accidents, big deal. And then you've got these big system accidents, showstoppers. We rammed the Briar into the Shetland Islands. I was brought into the Briar as well, thanks to BBC.
Oh, okay.
In the ships of shame. I was deep in the ships of shame by that time. Those are catastrophic accidents.
Yeah.
They are related, obviously, but they are very different. And so, yes, the helicopter accidents are kind of in between.
Yeah, because they can be a high loss of life.
Exactly. And so they follow this in between, and we're learning they've got their special challenges too.
Okay, NASA and the Space Shuttle. Could you talk about how you were involved with that, or?
Sure.
Yeah.
Carlene Roberts and I, and even that's kind of a backstory because I came to the University of California here at Berkeley in 1988. Okay. Officially in '89, with Piper Alpha, hot on my trail. I brought Piper Alpha in as my first research project. Okay. And I came out of Piper Alpha and I worked on it for 3 years. And in fact, barely missed Pan Am Lockerbie. I was supposed to be on the flight. But we were busy designing the replacement structure for Piper Alpha. And I was called into an unexpected meeting, had to cancel the flight, and was in a meeting with Brown and Root Vickers in London. Get to the Garden Hotel late at night, turn on the telly, and what do I see? My airplane is blown up.
You can tell you lived in Britain. You said telly.
Oh yeah.
American State TV. So then they called you in for like you were did you study
How did all this happen?
Yeah.
Okay, so here's Bob, the Piper Alpha thing, and he's into Exxon Valdez, and we start to publish. Well, we are understanding these big catastrophe accidents are combinations of human and engineering factors. Well, here's NASA playing out in a parallel domain, and they've had the Challenger. And then they had the Mars Polar Lander and the Mars Polar Orbiter. There's a difference between metric and English units. Oh yeah, we missed the planet. We pushed the wrong button. I said go up, not go down. Okay, and they started to see the same human factor thing penetrating, so they hired me as a consultant. And gosh.
And what was it? What did you find when you got there?
The same thing I'd found before.
Yeah.
They had some of the best engineers in the world. Really fine people. They even had a group they had developed on organizational and human factors. So they're not stupid. They're very smart people. I was in one of the early meetings and I said, tell me what your budget is annual for this effort to manage risk. They told me. And I said, how much are you investing in the human element? 10%. 90% was going to us engineers. We were having a ball.
Parties every night.
We were crunching numbers and watching risk go up and down. And how to put it, they were struggling to bring this succession of failures. They were big ones. They were having what they call 5 project failures per year at a cost of $5 billion and average 5 flight failures per year at a cost of $5 billion.
So they were racking up a bill.
They were racking up a bill, and this is costing money. And NASA is a business now because we'll call it, we can't fund them just through Congress. So we got to fund them through flying satellites and these kinds of things. So they are starting to look very interesting like a business. So they've got commercial demands, they've got scientific and engineering demands, and they're dealing with an extremely complex system in an extremely hazardous environment. Boom.
There it goes, yeah.
Okay. Now, I'm in Houston on Sunday, October 3rd, 2001 or 2001, and we're in the Holiday Inn outside of NASA headquarters, and we had been deliberating problems associated with a a shuttle they had launched called the Columbia shuttle. Okay, and we even had some Air Force satellite photographs of the Columbia in space showing missing tiles. And the Air Force had been so accommodating, they even drew arrows on the photographs that showed where the missing tiles were. Okay, and so we're deliberating the risk and the missing tiles and so forth. They come in that Sunday morning and say, we brought the Columbia back as we were talking about last night. pause, in pieces.
Jeez.
That then led me into the Columbia accident investigation.
So, what kind of, when you come across like an organization like NASA that's just had a big incident like that, is there like an institutional shock in there and everyone's kind of paralyzed and doesn't know what to do?
Well put. It is a shock. And no one really knows what to do. It's a sort of deer in the headlights, we call it in Texas.
Yeah.
And the deer is frozen. And of course, the same thing is happening in an organization. They were in shock.
So,
They had the Columbia Accident Investigation Board. My colleague, Carlene Roberts, testifies before the board. I'm working for NASA, so I can't testify.
so a bit of a conflict of interest.
So Admiral Gateman, who's heading the Columbia Accident Investigation Board, he's the equivalent of Lord Cullen for the Piper Alpha investigation. He's asking Professor Roberts about, what caused the Columbia accident? And she explains it in some very academic terms. And he said, Professor Roberts, could you please tell us more simply what was the primary cause? She looked at him and said, it's the organization, stupid.
Oh, wow. But why did they decide to bring it back down if they knew it was... I guess they thought they didn't have any other options, because how do you rescue people off a shuttle?
Well, first, they did know how to rescue it.
Okay.
They did know about how to task another extracurricular vehicle operation to replace the tiles in the vicinity of the air intakes on the left port side wing so that they wouldn't have burn through.
Okay.
But they said, we've gotten by with missing tiles before, and they had. So they said, we'll get by with it this time, we hope. And they brought it back in, it burned through, and we know the rest of the history. This is then what we would call, we're hoping for success. It's normalization of deviance is another term that Professor Diane Vaughn pasted to this. We got by with crossing the street out here, not looking both ways at the crosswalk, and we didn't get killed, so we do it the next time.
Yeah.
And that's
then
what
one
got
time
it.
you do get killed.
There you go.
So, looking towards the future, because I read again about and I'm going to get the name of it totally wrong, the San Joaquin sort of, the levees around San Francisco.
Those piles of dirt.
Yeah, so could you, because in Britain no one even knows they exist, so could you explain could you explain what they are, what the potential problems are, and what the potential outcome could be?
The California Delta infrastructure is an interesting example of United States infrastructure. We started the development in the gold rush days, 1850s. And we wanted land that could be developed agriculturally. Now, unlike the Netherlands or unlike southern Louisiana, we didn't have African Americans to build our levees like they did in Louisiana, but we had the Chinese who were instrumental in helping us build the railways.
Okay. Course, yeah.
So we tasked the Chinese to gather up baskets of soil, put it on their back, and pile it up around islands in the delta. So that when the water became high, the islands would stay dry, and we could agriculturally develop them. Well, time goes on, the levees get higher, the agricultural development gets more intense, and then we say, well, wouldn't this be a wonderful place to store natural gas. So we actually started to store natural gas there. And we say, well, running railways through populated areas, that's a big pain in the patootie. Let's run it through this farmland, we'll call it the Delta. And then we start to say, well, what about power transmission? So we built all these electric power transmission grids that are all coming through this area. And then we say, well, we need a port in San Francisco. Let's have Sacramento in the San Joaquin.
Okay.
Okay, and so we developed 2 new ports who go right through the same area. Well, at the end, you end up with this contortion of infrastructure, telecommunications, all of it goes through there.
Yeah.
All being defended by these piles of dirt. Okay, now, here's a connection. And you'd say, well, okay, who's really in charge of the piles of dirt?
Yeah.
A friend of mine at University of California at Davis, Professor J. Lund, I had a day meeting with him, and at the end of the meeting, asked this question. He said, "Oh, Bob, that's easy. Everybody and nobody." Okay, which means, well, we've got this complex system, and by the way, I left out the major star of this system. At the north end of our delta is lots of fresh water. At the south end of our delta is not a lot of fresh water because most of it comes through the delta and then starts to come into San Francisco Bay.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. But we've got some thirsty people at the south end of the delta called San Diego, Los Angeles, the San Joaquin Valley. They want water. Okay, so then it's this labyrinth of islands that are providing a buffer between salt water and fresh water, and we put the drinking straw for Southern California at the south end of the delta.
Oh, I never knew that.
So here's the big water problem. Okay, now then, let's start thinking about those piles of dirt. Well, we're having a failure of those piles of dirt, about 1 every year.
Okay, and what do you mean by failure?
They breach.
Oh, okay.
But there's just a few people there, doing farming.
Yeah.
They scream a little while until we pump the island out, we repair it. We keep on going, and the infrastructure keeps growing too.
Yeah, because
more
it's fine.
complex. Yeah. More highways through there. So it's getting more and more catastrophic, but yet the basic defense hasn't changed. And you'd say, okay, well, isn't the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in charge? Next big problem.
So they're not.
Because actually they're not.
Oh, so who is
They're
that?
only in part of the federal part of the levees. There's a state part, local recreation districts, their part, everybody and nobody responsible.
So it's going to go, you think? Do you think it will go eventually?
Yeah. It's destined to happen.
Yeah.
It's just a case of when and how.
And
It could be high water floods.
yeah.
It could be what we call sunny day failures. Water's low. You get sexually active beavers who like to cut a lot of holes in these dirt levees, and suddenly you have a sunny day failure.
So horny beavers could destroy San Francisco.
Sure. Or you could have an earthquake.
Yeah.
Oh, worse. Yeah. Now we're going to destroy a bunch of islands. If we had a big earthquake, destroyed a bunch of islands, knocks the delta out for a minimum of, we think, of 5 years. There goes a fresh water supply for Los Angeles, San Diego, and the San Joaquin Valley. Not a very happy days picture.
No.
So when you see all of this contorted, you'd say, well, okay, Bob, now let's be serious. You're not the only smart person in the world. There's lots of smart people around here. And indeed there are. So we go and talk to them. And we say, the risks are excessive. And they'd say, well, yeah, But what's the fix? And we said, well, we can't tell you what the fix is, but we can tell you the risk is excessive. Something needs to be done. And they say, we'll worry about that tomorrow. It's that short-term vision.
Yeah.
And our vision is pretty short-term.
Yeah, you worry about it when you haven't got any water.
And it's too late now.
Yeah, because it's happened.
And it's 5 years to fix, maybe.
Interesting point you raised there about how complex it's got in the Delta. Do you think systems can be too complex for humans to kind of keep control of?
Yes.
And how could we combat that? Could we technology, computers? Or?
Well, computers actually help make it more complex.
Okay.
They tend to hide things. Because remember, again, it's really the people who are attempting, we hope, if properly motivated and resourced, to detect things early enough so that they can rescue them. What I'd call appropriate simplification is to be encouraged. Simple is not stupid. But of course, us engineers enjoy complexity.
Yeah.
Make it so complex that only I can understand it. Man, this could be a life and engagement. So we've got these combating sort of incentives.
Would you think maybe, training engineers to be a bit less, I don't know, intricate?
Yeah.
Like from buildings like this, like start telling them that, you overcomplicate things. It may look very pretty on paper, but once it's out in the real world, it's going to cause some damage.
Correct.
Potentially.
No, that's a good way to put it. Thankfully, in the UK, you've got some colleges, universities that are long along this trail. I'm thinking University of Manchester, Dr. James Reason. I have a great deal of respect for Dr. Reason and his colleagues.
It's got a great name.
Yeah, it is. Let's reason. Notice he's a social scientist. He's not an engineer. Thank God. Right? Because Dr. Reason has been able to back off. Look at things in the UK like the rail industry. Very complex. You can injure a lot of people. You can kill a lot of people. You can actually destroy communities with railway freight cars that have hazardous explosives on board and blow up a city like we did in Canada.
Yeah, I saw that.
Quebec, okay. So he's been deep into that and saying, okay, we need to be aware of the human factors. Very importantly, the organizational factors. It's been brought into the educational process for engineers. In this country, it's still almost totally absent.
Why do you think that is?
We don't like people. And of course, I'm joking in a way.
You're not in another way.
Another way, I'm not. But one of the things that has helped sort of change that is we've, in the United States, thankfully, in engineering, seen a lot of women showing up inside of the engineering profession. The women seem to be able to more readily relate to the importance of the human factor thing in the context of the technological thing. That's posed a lot of hope. But there are very few faculty, universities here in the United States that are into this interesting coalition between social, political sciences and the engineering sciences.
So you've obviously spent quite a lot of time away from home. How did your dear wife cope with that?
I think very well. She's raised two very fine men. I'm proud of them. They're honest. They got integrity. One said he'd never be an engineer, but he is.
Oh.
He became a chemical engineer. The other said he liked animals, not people. So he's into large animal veterinary medicine.
Oh, okay.
It's a form of technology.
Yeah,
people are damned important.
Biological technology.
Bingo.
Yeah.
Okay. My wife is the secret for raising 3 sons. Me and those 2. Yeah, right. She's not so much that.
Yeah.
I was raised that way.
Oh, okay.
Her background is in early childhood education. How to teach what I call our rustle butts. When they walk, they make rustling sounds.
Okay.
They got diapers.
Okay.
When I came here to Berkeley, I didn't know how to teach. I probably still don't know how to teach.
Yeah.
So I went to her courses on how do you teach early age children. It's the same thing.
Okay.
If you make a mess on the floor, clean it up. So I come here to Berkeley, teaching at the graduate level. If you make a mess on the floor, clean it up. Well, that's how she's instilled in our family that stability.
Mm-hmm.
If you make a mess, clean it up, Bob.
So would you say, are you, I read that you're quite a direct person. Can you do you suffer fools gladly in this industry? Which I guess you can't because it's people's lives are at stake.
You're right, I can't. Yes, I am direct. But it's not because I want to be brutal or hurtful. It's actually because of, I think, 2 things. One, I am very concerned for my dishonesty. Well, not telling the whole truth and nothing but the truth. Withholding parts. Withholding parts of information. So part of it is almost a young child's determination to say it all as you best know it. Don't want to be hurtful. You want it to be constructive and knowledgeable, but for God's sakes, tell it and tell it all and do it now. The other part is I think some people respond better to directness. Here's what I think, rather than, well, let's talk about it. Let's negotiate what might be the truth. Now, the thing in the directness that I have to watch is some people can take it as perhaps being arrogant, overbearing, but I'm not doing it that way. I'm doing it, I say, here's my truth, and then you'll usually watch me, I'll stop. I want to hear their response. And if they think different, I want them to shoot straight back.
Yeah.
Because I might not have the truth either.
Yeah.
So I'm willing to accept I'm wrong. Let's find out what's right.
Yeah. Do you think that's perhaps one of the greatest motivations behind all of this, or one of the greatest reasons, is that people just won't accept they're ever wrong?
I'm watching it right now very painfully in the form of BP Macondo, Deepwater.
Yeah, weekly. Yeah.
BP, British Petroleum.
Yeah.
I've worked with BP since the first days of the North Sea. This is 1970s. I've seen that company come through a whole series of transformations, is a good way to put it. It's a fine company. Lots of damn good people. And I still see denial.
Yeah, even though, pretty plain obvious.
Well, it's not so obvious.
Yeah.
Not so obvious. This is another one that has taken me a while to get to understand. And again, I think the BP disaster has had many important lessons for people that are willing to spend the time to get to those lessons. One of the lessons I picked up that for sure was a horrible trap for BP and others is tied up in that word safe. But thinking and knowing are different things. Did they really know? Well, then I suddenly came to the recognition, well, can you measure safety? That links to another Bob Bea. I have a lot of sayings I use in class. You can't manage what you can't measure.
Very good.
Okay, and then I thought, well, what's a safe driving speed? Well, I don't have a speedometer. I'm 16, and I've just got my driver's license, so to speak, and I'm a little bit, drunk. And yeah, there's this hospital zone, and it's at night, but I've got to get the car home by midnight. So I'm 60 miles an hour, I think it is. I don't have a speedometer, so let's go. Okay. So there's where I think it gets started. Back to that nuclear power thing we touched on. Yeah. They came in measuring safety. Okay. And you look back at BP and you'd say, where's the risk speedometer? Can you measure risk? Can you measure the likelihood and consequences of failures? Well, the answer is yes, it's painful. It's not flawless. And the measurement helps give you some insight about, are you driving too fast for the road conditions and the location?
How do you measure it though? Is that a company secret?
Oh no, it's not a company secret at all. The airplane you flew here on, we have learned to quantitatively measure the likelihood that you would not have arrived alive. Okay, part of it we use statistics. That's looking backward.
Yeah.
Lots of flights, comparable conditions. So we'll say the likelihood of you arriving here not alive is one chance in 10 million. Okay. And you'd say, okay, Bob, where'd that number come from? Well, lots of flights every day. We compile statistics. And you'd say, well, is there anything else? Well, the conditions were all the same. We had air traffic control. The sequester was not a big effect. So we're watching lots of other indicators that say, well, that statistic, looking backward, is okay to look forward. But what if you don't have a lot of statistics? Okay, and then you'd say, well, could I run some experiments? Yeah, you could. And in fact, we tried to do some on Piper Alpha before it exploded. And you'd say, well, could you use other ways to get indexes of the risk? Yeah. And you'd say, well, okay, you got the index. Do you go to sleep? Oh, no. You say, wait a minute. You told me you had to have a speedometer. That's just to get your attention. And you'd say, but you don't believe the speedometer. No, I don't believe the speedometer because I know there's risk I can't predict. And you'd say, well, what do? You mean you're going to defend systems against risk you can't predict? And I'd say, yes. And they'd say, you are just full of it. You've been here at Berkeley too long. And I'd say, well, you need to meet a friend of mine by the name of Captain Sully Sullenberger. Sully and I were great friends before the Hudson.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Now, you'd say, how can that happen? I mean, he's a U.S. airplane pilot, and you're over here at Berkeley studying these freaky systems, And I'm sitting there saying, well, we used to work with, United Airlines. We used to work with Southwest Airlines. We even worked with U.S. Air. We even were in a meeting where the president of U.S. Air came to a meeting, confidential, as all of these had to be, and said, we've discovered why we had 5 fatal accidents 5 years in a row, and it's because we were having our pilots do safety checkouts on taxi out, so we had on-time departures. And 2 of them found out they didn't have enough fuel to make the airport if they had headwinds, but they had tailwinds until they got in the air, and they had headwinds.
Jesus.
And they crashed without sufficient fuel. So we decided to really embrace safety.
Yeah.
And Sully shows up here learning about how to manage the unpredictable, the unknowable. You think you've got it safe, but you can never be right. And how to put it, it's called interactive management.
Okay.
Now, my colleague, James Reason, whom I actually have a great deal of affection, I call it love, except in some parts of the world that's sort of judged to be kind of freaky. But I really have a great deal of respect for that man. He says, there's proactive and there's reactive management. And I'm a kind of a dummy. I say if there's proactive before and there's reactive after, there's got to be something during. So we went on interactive management. We got very deep into it through pediatric emergency room management.
Okay.
Somebody walks into the emergency room, a baby, and the baby's dying. Baby can't tell you what's wrong. How do they rescue the kid? We studied different emergency rooms, some with very high mortality rates, some with very low. And we found out they know how to do the OODA loop. Observe, orient, decide, act, keep trying.
Yeah.
Aha! So here's Sully Sullenberger over here learning about us OODA looping. I got an email that morning before he took off from LaGuardia Airport saying, Bob, we need to have a cup of coffee. We've got some things to talk about. Well, that day he pulled off interactive management together with a system that knew how to do it. It was not an accident. It was, in fact, rehearsed and prepared for.
It was amazing, wasn't it? I mean...
The airplane, the Airbus... did you notice how long it floated?
A long time, yeah.
But wait a minute now. Those things are supposed to be on land.
Yeah.
The engineers engineered backflow valves so the air intakes couldn't take in water.
Well, it's like that crash here. A few weeks back. The time.
The airlines.
Yeah. I looked at it and I thought, 10 years ago that plane would have just caught fire and everyone would have died. But it was only 2 people died, and that's a tragedy. But people were injured on it, and it was I was amazed actually.
Okay, see, this is that you needed a speedometer. That gets you started, that gets your attention, gets you on the right thing. But then you have to prepare your system for the unimaginable things. Sully and his crew and the Federal Aviation Administration, air traffic control, the whole thing was extraordinarily well prepared. Now let's go on board the Deepwater Horizon with BP. Were they?
Yeah.
No.
So they just didn't know what if things start going wrong. They're like, what?
They'd be like me back on my early days on the drill rig. Wouldn't know what to do. I'd freeze like the deer in the headlights. And at that point, the disaster overcomes you. It's a very complex system. It'll kill you, and it did. Could we have prevented it? Yes. See, that's what destroys my voice.
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Yeah. No, when you put it like that, that's such a great example of, one potential disaster. Sully, Deepwater. I'm sure Sully, what do you think the time frame they had Deepwater, how long they had to think what to do compared to Sully. I'm sure Sully had less time.
Let's see.
I know.
They had about the same time.
Okay, well.
Sully takes off,
Yeah.
and I'm thinking it's 8:45. Both engines are shut down when the geese get taken in. He's got 10 minutes to go through. He had to see if they're going to try and go back to LaGuardia, go to Teterboro or the Hudson, and makes a decision to go the Hudson. Yeah, right. And he notice he's going through and he's thinking, well, if I can't make it to Teterboro, I'm going to land on a highway. That's a hard, rough landing.
Yeah.
Lots of telephone poles in the way.
A few cars.
Yeah, a few cars. Now the river's open, and there's an emergency station with ferries right across. If I land this plane in the correct attitude, like a good water skier, I can skid that sucker right in across from the emergency rescue station.
It's amazing.
Okay. Now the guys on board the Deepwater Horizon, after they got the negative pressure test results, had about 10 minutes to have rescued it. One of them was going to the bathroom, had no backup. The other was on a telephone to a man to the shore saying, I think what we concluded was wrong. What do you think? The guys on the rig are saying, they said go, let's go. That's what we've got the pincers for, the blowout preventers. That weren't blowout preventers at all. And so the system fell apart.
Wow.
Yeah.
So do you think there's, because you tested, you were at the, I'm not sure, you were down in New Orleans when I first got in touch with you. So what was your job there? What were you doing there?
I've been testifying for the BP Deepwater Horizon. I was a first witness in phase one. Phase one was leading up to the blowout.
Yeah.
And so I testified what I had learned through my work with BP from 2000 through 2007 about their efforts to prevent it and why it hadn't been prevented. Well, they brought me back in phase two, which is after it blows out, we watch the oil come out in the water for 87 days, 150 some odd to get the relief well. So they had me testify about how did we react to the failure. So I had to testify in both phases.
So obviously it's still going on, isn't it? So do you think they'll learn any lessons from the aviation industry and things like that?
I hope so. I'm collecting. Collecting thinking. I still have some very, very good friends who work for BP. They really can't touch me right now. I'm sort of radioactive.
Hanging around Fukushima.
But my prayer is that BP's lesson will be a lesson for the entire industry. Right now, the last estimate I saw for the cost of this disaster is $70 billion US. That's the current estimate in the financial regime. And I look at that and I say, this is probably painful enough to get the attention of this extremely powerful, capable industry. Most people don't know this. This is the single most powerful, capable industry in the history of this earth.
Really?
Now, yes, I've worked for NASA and, all over. It is, really. And you'd say, but wait a minute, what's going on? And I say it's back to that A plus B equals C business. It's when the B gets in control, that hubris, arrogance, greed, et cetera, gets in control, then you're going to have it. And you'd say, but now if BP gets a lesson, and the stockholders and the retired people, their pensions have been exactly heavily negatively impacted. If they turn to the management and say, this will never happen again, make it so, there we got it. That's my whole prayer.
Yeah. I asked you, one of the questions I asked, what industries have had the most improvements? What industries need the most improvements, would you say, apart from oil?
Well, oil, the chemical industries in general. And it's because what they deal with is potentially so damaging to both people and the environment.
Well, Bhopal. That was
global climate change. Now, of course, in this country, we're still debating if there's global climate change. Thank God in your country, you're not. Most of Europe already has got the clear signals.
But just to jump in a second, but like Germany, like they shut all their nuclear power plants down after Fukushima. Do you think that was a good idea? Or no.
France didn't. They couldn't.
No, they definitely can't.
They couldn't. They go out of business quick.
Yeah, they'd be like, what are we going to do? We can't light our bistros.
I was sorry to see Germany do it because Germany has got a very capable society, some smart people.
Very smart.
And I would say, well, put some of that smartness to let's make these things truly safe enough, and then prepare them interactively to defend against these damn things we can't predict, sometimes called black swans.
Yeah.
And the answer is, well, yes. And if you can convince yourself you can do it, then perhaps Germany did the right thing. Stand down.
Yeah.
Until you can.
Yeah.
At that point, turn the switch back on and prove you can do it.
It's not really known for natural disasters, though, is it, Germany? It's like a...
Okay. Yeah. Next thing, in fact, it happened in this conference room. It was in here. Came back from one of my early trips to New Orleans and was talking to members of our Center for Catastrophic Risk Management. Sat up there and made the pronouncement, there are no natural disasters. There aren't.
No.
If you think about them, it's back to the A plus B equals C thing again.
Well, one thing that comes to mind is there was a flood in 1953 in the North Sea, and it rinsed out the Netherlands because they just didn't have the proper protection.
It gave a good dose to the Thames too.
Yeah,
on
the East Coast.
Yeah. And then the Thames barrier showed up.
Yeah.
And then the Dutch go to work and put in the North Sea closures.
All them.
And then they even opened up some land for water.
Yeah.
They said, we got to give water room. If you don't, it'll kick your ass.
But
and what do we do over here? Hey, let's go back to having a good time.
I think you just like disasters happening to you. It gives you something to watch on TV.
Here's our Delta.
It's like, because there's going to be hurricanes, there's going to be forest fires, there's going to be a very good chance of an earthquake.
Look at New Orleans.
Yeah.
We put $14.2 billion, low-bound estimate, into New Orleans after Katrina. Put in some strong points on top of all the weak points, and sea level continues to rise. The land continues to subside at about an equal rate.
But isn't it like the? Forgive my ignorance. It's like, isn't it like the sort of like this is the Louisiana coastline, the Mississippi comes here. This is the worst map ever, by the way. Doesn't the Mississippi just want to go down there or something? Yeah, and it's.
And we're fighting it.
Yeah, isn't there a case for just leaving cities? Because I once read about, the ancient world is scattered with cities that just went out of existence because
they had to.
Yeah, the climate changed. Yeah.
Well, in UK, you've developed 3 strategies for this problem. One is called fight. Okay, and that's part of what you've done with the Thames barrier system.
Mm-hmm.
You said, we can defend this, we'll fight it.
Mm-hmm.
The next one is flight. It's called get out of Dodge City. And so what essentially you do, you completely remove the operation. The other one is called freeze. When it happens, it'll happen, and we'll pay the consequences.
Yeah.
And thank God Europe is advanced in this line of thinking. You're actually going through the interrogation of those three strategies to your critical coastal areas right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of areas in like the East Coast. They just leave them. Yeah, they just go goodbye.
Fight, flight,
Yeah.
freeze. Well, over here, we want to turn to the channel for the next enjoyable Kim Kardashian thing.
Yeah. Well, that's a massive tidal wave.
Okay, now you asked a question I didn't answer, and I'd like to get back to
Sorry,
it.
yeah.
And you'd say, how in the hell do you arrest these things? Okay. And I'm going to go back to my friend, Ed Wing. Well, he died 2 years ago. But he's still a very dear friend. One night, he and I are in New Orleans shortly after Katrina, just before the delivery of our investigative report on the levee breaches in New Orleans that said the culprit's the Corps of Engineers.
So that was going to go down well.
That was going to go down well. Anyway, Ed looks at me across the dinner table and says, Bob, I can tell you why you've been such a failure in all of your life. And of course, graduate students and colleagues are sitting around the table listening to this. Come on. Here's this old man telling B why he's been such a failure. And I look back and say, well, why, Ed? He said, you don't know the secrets of a technology delivery system. I don't know what it is. And he said, okay, Bob, it's got 4 parts. Part 1, public. Oh, okay. Part 2, governments. Here in the United States, they'll buy in for the people, and if they ain't, you get them out. Number 3, crucial importance, industry and commerce. They are the fuel for the civilization. And the 4th one, knowledgeable representatives of the environment. He said, you got to get those 4 collaborating relative to the delivery of the technology. If you can get them to agree to deliver the technology as you are proposing to do it, then you've got a chance of doing it correctly. Next question. Ed, look, I'm pretty old. I'm going to die here pretty quick. How in the hell do I ever get to those 4 people? He said, first thing is, do you know who Senator Pelosi is? No. Well, she's a very powerful congressional representative for here in California. Huh? He said, you're going to have to learn who she is. You're going to have to go meet her. It's called get off your ass and go to Washington. Next one. Do you know commerce and industry? Oh, yeah. Yeah. I know those.
Yeah, you know
that bunch all the way through. He said, do you know the public? No, I don't like them. Stay away from them. You know, I publish technical papers that nobody will ever read. Only a few people who might give me a raise or a new job. And he says, and the environment, I know you don't like it. You're used to rape, pillage, and plunder. And he said, you're a wipeout. And I said, well, okay. He said, you're going to have to go and correct all 4 of those. And I said, how do I ever do that? And he said, do you know what's called responsible media? I said, no. He said, do you know John Schwartz, New York Times? No. Do you know Jim Lehrer, Public Broadcasting System, Lehrer NewsHour? No. He said, you're gonna. You're going to start collaborating, working with the responsible media because they provide the access to those 4 components. At that point, you got a chance to make it work. Until then, you're out of luck, Bob. You will continue to fail.
Yeah.
There's the answer. Until you get the 4
working,
you're dead. That's why I accepted your invitation,
well, thank you very
right?
much. Yeah.
You're a representative of a responsible media.
Well, yes.
Yeah. You become crucial in being able to...
But did you not think the media is just, as time goes on and our sort of media kind of fades away, like print and stuff like that, it's just going to be, like you said, it's just going to become entertainment. And the people listening, it's a pessimistic view of the out.
Well, I think it's realistic.
Yeah, thanks, Bob.
I think it's very realistic, but no, it doesn't quite go away. There are still active deliberations happening in New Orleans about the need for a new New Orleans. Defend the central part that didn't do badly in Katrina.
French Quarter, yeah.
Defend that well, surrender the rest, and move north. Let the river divert. Let the Atchafalaya take the new mouth. Develop a new commercial port center.
That's going to cost billions.
Well, so does going through these disasters. Hurricane Katrina, probably $200 billion US. Jesus. God only knows the impact on the internet or the United States economy. I think we can see it, quite frankly. They continue to happen over and over. And they cost 100 to 1,000 times more after they happen than if you'd invested before.
And also, they're going to keep happening because things are going to pop
more
up.
Complex.
More complex. And also, it's quite a young country. I know it's
we are.
Yeah, so you're not...
We're 2 generations from shooting each other in the OK Corral.
Yeah. And 2 generations away from doing it again.
We're a young civilization.
So you've got to have the shocks maybe to know what to do next.
And the United States has shown it's only a really traumatic shock that seems to get our attention for very long.
Yeah, it's pretty much, which is, I think that may be a part of, I'm not a cultural anthropologist, but it may be part of the...
Certainly not me, I'm a dumb engineer.
Okay, last question. Hurricane Betsy, and I believe you did some good stuff and some bad stuff happened to you during that, so if you could talk about that.
Hurricane Betsy, September 9th, 1965. By this time, I'm chief offshore engineer for Shell Oil Company. Not a far distance from the drill rig. Okay. And we had just bought our first home, New Orleans. And I'm working downtown New Orleans. My wife has taken our first son to Florida for a vacation. Bob doesn't take vacations. He stays at home, works, doing what Bob does. They're in Florida. I'm in Louisiana. We've got offshore platforms by this time. Very advanced weather forecasting capabilities. See a storm by the name of Betsy headed for Florida. Call my wife, say, you need to get out of there, come to New Orleans where it's safe. They were in a low-lying area. So she gets on an airplane, flies to New Orleans. I meet them at the airport, take them home. We evacuate our home at midnight that night because the storm followed them across Florida straight into New Orleans. We lost everything. Jeez. 12 feet of water into the house. Everything lost, including wedding photographs, marriage license, and the rest of those traumatic things. Now, they live in my office, downtown New Orleans, the old Shell building, for 2 months. We ran out of 25-cent pieces for sandwiches from the sandwich machines, and then I liberated sandwiches from the sandwich machine. She was sensible enough, as usual, to bring baby formula and the rest of that for our young son. Pretty dismal story. Okay, and then I'll do almost to the day, 40 years next forward flash, and I'm back in New Orleans. I go back to the location of our previous home. They have bulldozed the old house, put a new house there, and the owners are dragging wet, oily mattresses out of the front door, just as I had done 40 years before. They lost everything again. Okay? And I got to do another stop shot. I'm going to go back to 1954. You say, God, that's funny. You're back to 54. We talked about 65. And then you shot forward to 2005. I said, yeah. And why are you back in 54? Well, I'm going to work for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. They assigned me to Lake Okeechobee. My assignment is to help them drain the Everglades. I built levees, pump stations, and canals to drain the levees. We don't need these damn gators. And of course, the plea today is, Bob, please put the water back. We destroyed an important natural environment. Notice another thing. When I went to New Orleans in 2005, I already understood a good deal about the Corps of Engineers. My father was a career officer. Also knew what it was to be a victim. Inside a home in a low-lying area. Behind those levees that were impenetrable.
Of course.
And that President Johnson said at the airport in New Orleans, this will never happen again.
And people forgot. They just forgot, didn't they?
So when all of that floods through, you'd say, no wonder you lost your voice.
Yeah. I think that's a good time to end it. That's a great story.